up to this master class. I just want to let you know that you are in the right place. The special speaker that we have has been in the industry for almost a decade, has helped over 700 plus clients and trained thousands of agents across the US. She is the queen, the master of IULs, and has produced content over all platforms and social media and has a following over 100,000 plus. Her hard work has definitely proven herself to be someone that is reliable and dependable. She is the founder of Illuminates Your Wealth community, and she is one of the top female advisors in the industry to date. I want y'all to welcome Amanda, the amazing Ryba.
Good stuff, good stuff. Well, thank you so much for the introduction, Miss Bethany. It is great to
Yes,
see you all tonight. How's everyone doing this evening? Awesome, awesome,
doing
awesome. Well, again, I want to thank Bethany for taking the time to introduce me, and it's great to see each and every one of you. So, whether you know me because you've worked with me at some point, either as a client or a potential partner, or maybe you just follow me through social media, whether it's through YouTube, whether it's through Instagram, whether it's through TikTok, I'm happy that you all are here tonight because I have one goal in mind for today's class, and that is to turn each and every one of you into IUL masters to get you out there and to get you knowing how to properly talk about these products, how to properly design them if you are in the field, and how to properly sniff out the bad agents, I guess is the best way to say that. So, Bethany, thank you so much for the introduction. I'm curious before I kind of dive in today. I want to know who we have on the call today. So, if you are a licensed agent in the industry, put a one in the chat. Let's see how many licensed agents we have in the industry. Hopefully, quite a few. Excellent, excellent, excellent. If you are not a licensed agent in the industry and you're just like looking to learn about the products, maybe give me a two. Let's see who else we have here. I was just looking to learn, maybe looking to get into the industry. Okay, we've got a few. Okay, perfect. So a little bit on both sides. Excellent. So that just helps me make sure that I'm going to tailor my message to you guys all correctly today. But I don't want to waste any time. Hopefully you all know who I am or you wouldn't be here. So let me share my screen and I will walk you all through what our overall topic is for today. So let me make this a little bit bigger. And this is going to be, I promise, the best use of the next 1 hour of your time if this is the industry that you are looking to master. So Miss Bethany is going to help you filtering questions. So if you guys do have any questions as we go through, which I'm sure you have questions, I'm sure they're going to come up. Just make sure that you toss them in the chat, or if you want to write them down, you can hold them till the end. We will definitely do some Q&A. But again, the goal today is IUL Master Class. And we are going to be going over how to design IULs like a professional, like a pro. As Bethany said, I've been in the industry for a long time. This is one of the top products, one of the very first products I ever worked with when I started my career. So I know quite a bit about it. Now, obviously, the overall goal is to just basically turn you guys into IUL pros. I am so over what we call the bad agents, the bad actors. I just recently I just had a phone call with a couple ladies that had reached out to me through YouTube just a couple days ago to review an IUL that they had gotten a quote for that they just felt like was wrong. They just felt like this just doesn't align with what I've been learning and what I've been studying. Like something's wrong. And just through a phone call, we were able to uncover it was a complete disaster. So luckily, they did not go through with it just yet. We were able to make some changes. But my big mission is to make sure that other people don't get put in that same position because these products are amazing. But if they're not designed correctly, they could be the worst thing somebody has in their financial portfolio. And that is the reason why there is so much bad press out there about them, just because of the fact that there are so many agents that are just uneducated in how they work. And like I had said with these ladies, I want to give your agent the benefit of the doubt and assume that they didn't intentionally try to screw you over, that they just are uneducated about how these accounts work, which is a good chunk of the industry. If you're in the industry and you don't know this, IULs are considered advanced, like elite level, high ticket products. The traditional industry doesn't offer them. They don't know anything about them. So, really, it's actually quite challenging to find somebody that does know how these things work and does know how to design them. So, today we're going to cover it. I do have to start with a little bit of a disclaimer. I'm going to read it just because I have to, but basically, the information that is going to be provided to you guys today, it's for educational purposes only, and it is not intended, and it shall not be understood or construed as financial, legal, tax, or investment advice. I'll let you guys read the rest of this, but I'm not a CPA. I'm not acting in the capacity of an attorney. If you guys have specific questions, I recommend you sit down with a licensed financial professional to have those conversations. Today is just purely for educational purposes only. Now, a little bit about me. If you don't know my experience, I have been in the industry, like for Bethany had said, for just shy of a decade, right? We're rolling into officially 10 years. I have been working with clients since the very beginning of my career with IULs, creating financial plans. I've trained thousands of agents across the country, as well as in one-on-one. I'm very proud to say that I'm the founder of the Illuminate Your Wealth community, which is all through social media and now branching off into YouTube, which I know some of you probably found me from there, and also a member of the advisor council for our agency. So that's a little bit about myself. But today, the whole goal is to talk IULs. So let me move this out of my way so I can see you guys a little bit bigger. But I'll move this down here actually. So IULs, if you don't know, right? Again, this is not a beginner class, so hopefully everybody that's here knows a little bit about them. I'm going to give you a little bit of background, but today we're going to kind of get into the weeds. It's going to get a little bit technical, not too technical where hopefully I don't lose anybody, but technical enough where by the time we walk out of here in the next hour, you guys feel confident, you feel good to go. So, an index universal life insurance policy is a type of permanent life insurance that combines a death benefit with a cash value component that grows just simply based on the performance of a stock market index. And we're going to dive into a little bit more about what that means. But if anybody ever asks you, what is it? This is what it is in its simplest form. It's not an investment. It's not a get rich quick tomorrow type of product. It's simply a life insurance policy that has a few moving parts and features, right? What I always say is there's three things that essentially make an IUL unique. Number one, permanent life insurance, right? If you don't want that, you probably shouldn't be looking at an IUL. Number two is it comes with living benefits. Now, you do have to get approved for that feature, but it's an amazing side to the product where you have the ability to access the death benefit of the life insurance while you are alive if you were to get severely sick or injured. So that is a big one. We also have the ability to grow cash value, which I think is probably the number one reason why most people open up an IUL is because there's different ways we can design it. So, my opinion, we call it the Swiss Army knife when it comes to financial products because there's so many moving parts and pieces to it. Now, I'm going to cover this a little bit. I don't want to get too in the weeds of it, but a lot of people don't know the true story on where an IUL even came from and how it has evolved over the years. So, just a little bit of a history. Back in the 1970s is when a little product called Whole Life was created. Did you guys know that whole life insurance is literally 300 years old? It's crazy. There's no specific date on when it was invented, but back then it was created, and today it's still used. It's still probably the number one go-to product for permanent life insurance because it provides a guaranteed death benefit with a cash value component, right? That grows based on dividends that are credited to the actual policy holders. Well, since then, right, when we turned into the 19th, 20th century, right, products started to get a little bit better. Universal Life came out in the late 70s, and it basically allowed clients to have what's called a flexible premium, meaning they no longer had to stick with this one flat premium forever. They could put in a little bit more one month, they could put in a little bit less one month, and the death benefit could also be flexible. So it started to make the product just a little bit more moldable to what people are trying to do. Then they came out with something called variable universal life. If you guys don't know, you could literally sneeze and probably make $1 million in the stock market back in the late 80s and 90s because it was doing really well, right? So if you had the opportunity to have cash in an account where it's accessible tax-free and it's in the market, sounds like a win-win. The problem is the market didn't do so well once the 2000s kind of rolled around, right? So not the biggest or most popular product anymore. But since then, the creators of these products decided to come up with something we call the best of both worlds, where they combined the safety of the whole life and the universal life, the flexibility, I should say, of the universal life, and then they created the growth potential of the variable universal life, and they came out with what is now called index universal life. And that was originally created in 1997. Very first company to roll it out was Transamerica. They are, yes, officially the actual creators and inventors of it. And again, as we all know, it's the death benefit plus the flexible premiums plus the cash value that's indexed in the market. So you can't lose money, right? Due to a stock market loss. So this just kind of shows over time where the growth has come from. And it's important to know the history of it so you kind of see the trajectory and where we are headed. From there, why would somebody ultimately choose to own an IUL, right? Like what would somebody be interested in? Like what would the most important parts be? First, if they're looking for life insurance with flexible premiums and nowadays living benefits, that's a good reason to choose an IUL. Second, if they would like to build wealth in an account that's going to grow accessible at any time in the future, tax and penalty free with zero stock market risk. The key word here is grow, key words, right? Grows accessible at any time, tax and penalty free. It does not grow tax free, it grows accessible tax free, right? Hopefully, we all know that. It grows tax deferred. We have the ability to access it tax free. So when we're talking about these products, we need to make sure we're using the correct language and not portraying it as something that it is not, because it grows tax deferred. We can access it tax free through different policy loans, which we're going to get into a little bit of that tonight too. So before we get into the fun stuff, unfortunately, we have to talk about our good friends, the IRS, right? If you put those two words together, it spells a little word called theirs because we say that they think everything is theirs. That's my one little joke for the day, right? It's true, right? They take everything they possibly can, including life insurance. So if you guys don't know, I'll tell you the little story. I actually have a YouTube video out there about this where back in the day, there was no rules around life insurance, permanent life insurance. You could put as much money as you wanted into these accounts. If Brad wanted to put $100,000 a year into his policy and only get a $50,000 policy, he could do it. It actually was a thing back in the day. The problem was that actually fell into the hands of not so good people, and permanent life insurance became a place for massive money laundering. So if you work in the life insurance industry, I guarantee you've taken an anti-money laundering course. It's required now because of the fact that people were doing a lot of money laundering in whole life back in the day. And of course, the IRS found out and had to step in and put some rules around it and govern the product so that the life insurance policy is actually being used for life insurance. It's not being used as an investment, which is what was happening back in the 50s and the 60s. So couple things came into effect, right? We've got TEFRA, DEFRA, TAMRA. I'm not going to dive into them specifically, but these laws all came out in the 80s and they govern the specifics around how the life insurance policy can be funded to make sure that it's not creating any sort of taxable event, it's not being overfunded, and again, it's still being structured as an actual life insurance policy as the main purpose. 7Z2E, 7702A, and 101A are the tax citations that actually allow you to access the money inside the IUL tax-free. They allow it to grow tax-free, be accessible tax-free, and pass on and transfer to the beneficiaries 100% tax-free, right? So I'd recommend maybe take a screenshot of this. Again, I'm not going to dive into it too much, but it's just important for you guys to know that there are specific laws and rules that govern it, and IUL is not too good to be true. If it were, none of this stuff would exist, right? There's a lot of rules around it. From there, I want to spend a lot of time today talking about the actual designing of the IUL. Give me a 5 in the chat if you have ever sold an IUL before. Okay, a good amount of people. Excellent, a few of us. Uh, Give me a 3 in the chat if you are looking to purchase an IUL and you're here to try to understand it. Few of us. Okay, cool. Little mix of the two, right? So a 4. So we're in between. I like it. I like it. Okay, perfect. So this might get a little technical. So for those of you that are not agents, this may get a little technical. If you are agents, hopefully we know some of this stuff, and there'll probably be some things that are new to you. But in case you don't know, there are 4 main ways to design an IUL. First is college, or what we call, I would say, juvenile accounts, college planning, right? It's basically when parents or grandparents start saving smaller amounts into the plan with the plan to increase that probably later on for use for college or higher education expenses. You can also design it nowadays for what we call tax-free retirement income. The politically correct way to say this would be supplemental income in retirement that is accessible tax-free. Didn't all fit on my slide, so I'm summarizing it in tax-free retirement income, right? But it's basically when the owner starts saving probably a smaller amount today with the plan to increase that premium, which, if you don't know, a premium is just what you're saving into the policy later on as they make more money, right? So they're going to increase that over time with the intent to obviously take it out in retirement. Life insurance with living benefits, you can also design it specifically just for life insurance, where the insured is most likely going to pay the least amount of money possible to get the absolute most amount of life insurance they can possibly get. And then you can also design it for immediate access to cash, or the buzzword that is out there today is infinite and family banking. That means that you're contributing large amounts of cash up front with the expectation to access that money relatively pretty quickly. So Four different ways you can design it. All four different ways have different moving parts and pieces. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to dive into different components of the IUL, and then I'm going to relate that afterwards to how you would actually structure plans for each one of these types of clientele. So at the end, I'm going to show you an actual illustration for each type of clientele so you can see after we learn how to structure it what you should be doing. So first is we got to understand our death benefit options. There are different death benefit options that you can be choosing from. Number one, I keep moving you guys around. Number one is a level death benefit. A level death benefit means the cash value does not get added to the death benefit when somebody were to die. Now, you might be thinking, why would somebody choose that? Believe it or not, there are actually situations where that makes sense. And I'm going to show you that as we move on. Number two, right? So it's either option one or A, option two or B, right? Is an increasing death benefit, which means your cash value does get added to your death benefit when you pass away, and your beneficiaries will inherit both tax-free. So if anybody has ever heard of a gentleman named Dave Ramsey and the Ramsey Company preaches that your cash value does not get added to your death benefit when you die. That's 100% incorrect. That is whole life. In whole life insurance, the cash value doesn't get added to the death benefit. In an IUL, you have the choice if you want to, you can. And then option three is return of premium. So this basically means that any of the premiums that are paid into the policy will get paid back out to the beneficiaries when that person passes away. Not the cash value, but whatever the premiums were that were paid in. And there are times where that makes sense. The key thing that you need to remember is the general rule of thumb is that an increasing death benefit is usually what you want to select while the client is contributing money into the policy. And then when they stop contributing money, or they're maybe in retirement, they don't want to add any more dollars to it, that's when you would want to switch the death benefit to level because there's no more money going in. So essentially, there's nothing left to increase. You guys all follow me so far? Cool. Okay. I would recommend take a screenshot of that. Second, a little bit more technical, we got to talk about the life insurance tests. There are two. You can do CVAT. CVAT is really the test that you would select if the client is putting in large sums of cash. So if, for example, Zach's got a client that wants to do 150,000 a year for 5 or 6 years, you might want to look at CVAT. Run it, see how it looks, right? The comparison to that is GPT, right? CVAT stands for Cash Value Accumulation Test. GPT is Guideline Premium Test. And this is usually the better option if your client is funding smaller amounts over time, which is probably 90 to 95% of what your clients are going to be doing. You're going to usually choose GPT. Now, what these two tests are governing is the fact that there has to be a gap between the amount of life insurance that the client gets and the amount of cash value that is accumulating inside that policy. It's called the corridor of insurance, meaning, for example, oh, let's see who we have here. For example, Dagima can't go out there and get a $100,000 policy and then grow $120,000 in cash value inside of it. Doesn't work like that. If that happened, the IRS would look at Dagima's policy and be like, officially, this is no longer life insurance because the cash value has surpassed the amount of life insurance inside the policy. It is now officially an investment, and all of her cash value is now taxable. She has to maintain a gap, a corridor of insurance, where the insurance always has to be higher than the cash value inside of an IUL. And these two tests, CVAT and GPT, are the different ways that you can do that. So, meaning, and that's also where like the level and the increasing death benefit come into a play in this as well. So hopefully this isn't too confusing. Most of the insurance companies that we work with today wouldn't allow you to reduce the gap, the corridor of insurance. Most of them would kick out any extra premium anyways. I actually had that happen with a client where they accidentally overfunded their policy too much, where they would have compressed that corridor, and the insurance company literally sent them a check in the mail and said, so sorry, we cannot accept this. You would have created a MEC, which is called a modified endowment contract, meaning that you've contributed too much premium, you've compressed the corridor too much, and now it's become a taxable policy. So this is probably the most technical thing that we're going to cover today. You just have to always remember that the cash value has to be less than the life insurance. So as you guys are looking at the illustrations, the cash value, the death benefit always has to be above whatever the cash value amount is. That's how we keep it tax free, right? That's how we keep it accessible tax free. Now, probably one of my favorite topics is the loan provisions, right? The ability to essentially access money out of your IUL. There are two main ways you can access money out of an IUL. There are simply withdrawals and there are loans, right? Withdrawals, this actually removes the money out of the account, right? So if you're withdrawing money, you're withdrawing it out of the account. It might create a taxable event. So if you're withdrawing your interest out of your IUL, like actual withdrawal, your interest is now going to be taxable, just like it would be if it was any other type of an investment. And the downside to withdrawal is you do not have the ability to essentially repay that money back into the policy. It would have to be considered what's called a new contribution. So, for example, let's say that April's maximum contribution she can put in per year is $20,000 a year. And let's say that April withdraws out $50,000 from her policy. She withdrew it, right? She does not have the ability to go and put that 50,000 back into her policy because of the fact that her maximum she can contribute per year is 20,000 a year. So she's kind of screwed. In order to get it back in, it would have to be considered a new contribution. So, in my personal opinion, withdrawing it should never be what you do. That should be like an absolute, absolute last resort. Like, realistically, you should probably just never do a withdrawal. Like, just consider that not even an option. Loans are what we typically want to look at, right? And there's hopefully with most insurance companies today, not all, but with most, there are two different types of loans you can do. There are standard loans and there are what is called alternative. Sometimes they're called participating. Sometimes they're called variable. Sometimes they're called indexed. So just to confuse you, there's four different names. My box couldn't hold all four, so I picked the most two popular, which is usually alternative or participating, right? But variable, index, alternative, participating, they all mean the exact same thing. They work the exact same way. Standard, they're almost always going to be called either standard or what some people will call them as declared loans. They work the exact same way. So standard or declared loans work. Let me move you guys over here. They basically remove your money from the account, just like a withdrawal would do, but they don't create a taxable event. And the reason is because you're loaning it to yourself, right? And because of the fact that we're loaning it to ourselves, we're accessing the interest tax free, and we can repay that loan at any time. There's nobody saying that we can't put it back. So if April did take out 50,000 from her policy and it was on a loan, she has the ability to repay that loan at any point. Now, most standard loans are usually next to nothing in terms of a cost. A lot of times they're what we call zero wash loans, where they might charge April 5% to take it out, but they would credit her 5% at the end of the year. So standard or what we call declared loans, probably the better option to choose if you don't plan to put the money back in, or if you think the market is not going to do well. I would probably be looking at a standard loan if I was the client. Alternative, or what we call participating loans, these are the sexy loans that you see everybody talking about on social media. These are our infinite banking loans. These are the loans that allow us to use our money in two places at one time, right? So, how it works is you actually borrow against your cash value, you don't deplete it. So, if Bryant has $100,000 in cash value and he borrows out 80 grand on an alternative loan, his cash value kind of still going to stay 100 grand. It's going to grow, it's going to accumulate as though that 80,000 never left. Now he can't borrow it because they already took it out, right? But it's going to grow and compound and earn him interest on the full amount, right? On the original amount that he had inside that policy. Now, it also does not create a taxable event, right? Because of the fact that it's a loan, obviously it's coming out tax-free and we can repay it at any time. Now, the downside to the alternative loans is they have to charge you an interest rate and they're not going to credit you back. Where most insurance companies will credit you back on a standard loan, they're not going to credit you back on an alternative loan or a participating loan because you're actually borrowing the insurance company's money. And this is one thing to set straight. A lot of incorrect information is out there on social media where when we talk about this, people think that you're borrowing from the death benefit. I've literally had people book appointments with me and say, I would like $1 million IUL. I'm like, okay, why? Because I need to access 900,000 on a loan to buy a house. What? This is not a bank. Like, what? Like, that's what people think. They literally think that they're borrowing from the death benefit. That's not how this works. You're borrowing based on the capacity that you have available, based on your capital, right? That's inside that account, your cash value. So if you have $1 million policy with 100,000 in cash value, you're good for the 100,000. That's how the insurance company looks at it. So they'll loan you up to $100,000 of their money because you're good for it, right? They see that you have the capital for it. And then you can just pay them interest to borrow the money and pay your loan off at any point. So it depends on what the client is looking to do. If the client is looking to do some kind of an investment or they're looking to purchase some real estate or maybe make a business deal, sometimes the alternative participating loans can make more sense. You just have to know that they're going to have a higher expense. There might be 5%, 6% to borrow it. But the way I explain it to clients is, okay, you're paying 5, 6%. Number one, where can you go to get a loan where you're only paying 5 or 6% today? Probably nowhere, unless you have stellar credit. But let's just say you're paying 5.5%, right? If your policy earned 10, you're paying 5, you netted 5 plus positive percent interest on money that doesn't technically exist. That's how I explain it, right? And then if the market's not doing well, you go with a standard loan where they might charge you 2 or 3%, but they recredit you 2 or 3%, so your loan is free. The key is always accessing money on some kind of a loan so that you're not creating taxable events and so that your client has the ability to put the money back at some point. Key? Cool. So this is super important. And not every insurance company offers these. More and more of them are today, but in the beginning, when IULs first came out, all they offered was standard loans. Alternative and participating really probably has just gotten popular, I would say, in probably the last, oh my God, 3 to 5 years. Because a lot of my clients' policies from 7, 8, 9 years ago, they don't have that as an option. It wasn't available back then. So this is newer. Just know if you want that feature, you have to make sure the insurance company that you're working with offers it. I would also be asking certain questions around what years can we access these loans? There are certain companies that don't allow you to do an alternative loan for maybe 3 years, or maybe 5 years, or maybe 7 years. Some allow you to do it after 30 days. So just some things to consider. Most will always allow you to do a standalone at any point, and withdrawals, of course, at any point. As long as there's money in surrender value, you have access to it. So from here, one thing that is also very important to cover is the different indices that you can choose from inside of your IUL. There are two different types of indices that exist, right? There are our traditional indexes, which are like your S&P 500s, your NASDAQs, your Russell 2000s, right? All the traditional indexes that most people know about today. And then there are what's either called alternative or sometimes called low volatility indexes, which are things that you most likely have no idea what they are. So just know if you're looking at your available indexes to choose from and you can't pronounce something or you don't know what it is, it's most likely going to fall under the alternative or low volatility side of the options that are available. Fidelity Multi-Factor is a big one. PIMCO is a big one. Mark 5, that's making its appearance into a lot of IULs, JP Morgan's. There's many others, but those are just some of the different ones. Now, the key that I have learned over the years of doing this for a very long time is you don't want all your eggs in one basket, right? There are pros and cons to both. Now, how the insurance companies make money doing this is they have 4 different ways they're going to take a piece of your profit, some way, shape, or form inside of the IUL, right? Because we all know it's not too good to be true. So it could be through a spread, which means they're taking like a percentage off the top of that index. Very common to see in the traditional indexes. If you're using an S&P 500, they might give you like a 6% spread or a 9% spread. What that means is if they're giving you like let's say they're charging you a 6% spread, the S&P has to do at least 6% for you just to break even at zero. If the S&P does 10, they get 6, you get 4. If the S&P does 20, they get 6, you get 14. That's a spread. It's coming off the top, right? Caps are a max that you can earn. So again, very common to see in the traditional indexes, you'll see spreads and you'll see caps. Where if you're in, for example, the NASDAQ, that sucker can do 30, 40% per year. Well, they're not going to give you that. They might cap you at 10 or maybe 9 or maybe 11, right? Depending on the insurance company. So pay attention to that. Fees. Fees and participation rates are very common to see in the alternative indexes, in the low volatility indexes, where for example, let's say they give you no cap, right? There might be an uncapped index with that, which that is like super sexy to sell to clients, but they're going to charge you a fee for it. So they'll say, okay, you can earn whatever the market does, but we're going to charge you a 1% fee per year to be in that index. Very common to see in the alternate ones. Or nowadays, you'll see a lot of what's called participation rates, which this could really work for you or against you depending on which one you do. Higher participation rates are commonly seen in the alternative indexes, where I know, for example, like the Mark 5, there's one insurance company I work with that gives you a 240% participation rate on that index. So what that means is you think of a participation rate almost as like a multiplier on your money. Where if the market does 10%, 10 times 240%, or essentially 2.4, means that client is going to get credited 24%, right? If I'm doing my math correctly, 240. So if the actual index itself does 10% times 240%, that client's going to get credited 24% if they've got a 240% par rate. I call it a multiplier, right? It's the best way to explain it. But you'll also see participation rates with the traditional indexes where they limit the growth. So instead of giving you 1 to 1, right, 100% participation, they might give you 60% participation. So, but no cap. So if you want to be in the S&P, they might say, okay, we'll give the S&P with no cap, but we'll give you a 60% participation on it, which means if the market does 10, you get 6. The market does 20, you get 14, right? So all different ways they limit it, all different ways that they do it. At the end of the day, it's not too good to be true. It's just important to know that there's always going to be something that's given back to the insurance company. And you kind of need to look at like the history and the trajectory of the indexes to really know what's going to make the most sense. So I'm going to show you guys an example. This is one of the insurance companies that I work with, and it's nice because they put it up here. It's pretty easy to see. So first, if you take a look at the cap rates, you're going to see S&P, Fidelity Multi-Factor, S&P, High Par S&P, Uncapped S&P, 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 S&P Mid Cap, Russell 2000, right? All the different indexes you can choose from. Some have caps, right? 10.5% cap on their traditional S&P. NA means there's no cap, no cap, no cap, right? Where a lot of people might default to thinking, I want to go for something with no cap, right? That sounds like the best option. Why would I want to cap my client if I can go fully no cap, right? Where this has a 9.65, this has a 3.5% cap because it's a monthly, right? So I'm going to show you. You can also look at the participation rates. We call them par rates, right? This one, again, the high par fidelity multi-factor is uncapped with a 245% participation rate. Sounds great, right? Sounds amazing. This one, same thing, uncapped with a 200% participation rate. So a rookie is going to look at this and be like, that's where we want our money. And those two, uncapped, high pars, done, right? No fee, let's go. Now, you can also look at the spreads. So they've got, this is actually a really good spread, but they've got an S&P 500 with a 6% spread. Most of the time it's like 8 to 9, so that's actually a really darn good spread option. But looking at this, right, again, if you don't know what you're doing, you probably would choose uncapped high par, right? That's where most people go. Been in the industry for a long time. I will tell you guys, that is not what you want to do. Diversification is key. You don't want all of your eggs in one basket. You can spread out the percentage of cash flow into any of these that you want. I usually recommend choose at least three. You don't want all your cash in one area because there are going to be times where one's up and times where one's down. So if we actually look at the past performance of these specific indexes, this is going to show you how they've done, right? These are all the ones that we just looked at. So averages over the last 20 years. Again, you guys remember that Fidelity, high par, multi-factor, blah, 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 right? High returns, right? Averages 11.4%, 9.3 over the last 20 years. Really high, right? Where the S&P 7.4, this one's at 8.8, this is the one with the spread, 7, 8.2, right? So just again, just looking at this, a rookie would say, let's put everything here. Let's do 50-50, right? Let's put it between these two indexes. But if you did that, look what would have happened to your client's money last year. 0%, 0%. They wouldn't have earned anything last year. Where if your client was in the S&P 500, the S&P did 23% last year, your client would have earned 10.5%. If you look over here, S&P with a spread, your client would have earned 17% last year. You look over here, S&P point to point uncapped, right? This one would have done 14%. This one would have done 21%. Or the last month of last year, the S&P grew by 21% in a month. This client got 21% in a month if their money was spread out. So this is why it's just important to diversify in a company like this one that does this. I'm usually looking at like 20%, 20, 20, 20, 20. I'm like picking different indexes that I like. But these alternative or what we call low volatility indexes, typically when the markets are doing really well, they don't perform. They're usually going to zero out because they transition a lot of money in cash when the markets are doing really well. They don't like a lot of volatility. So moral of the game, moral of the story, always keep some money in an S&P or a NASDAQ. Always keep some money in a low volatility or an alternative. Because usually when one's up, one's down. So they kind of balance each other out, if that makes sense. So From here, this actually shows like an actual look back performance on what the index strategy would have done compared to the traditional S&P 500. So I love this chart. If we go all the way back to the year 2000, starting with just $100,000, right? Your S&P would have been down 10%. Index would have obviously gotten 0, 0, 0, just because of the fact that we don't lose money when the market goes negative. This index is showing a 12% cap on the S&P. So you can just see over time, right? It's going to grow, 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 grow. It tanks, we flatline, grow, 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 tanks, we flatline, right? So on and so forth. So over time, the actual rate of return on the index would have been 6.4, where the actual rate of return on the S&P would have actually only been 4.02. So it's significant. These are the things that are important to explain to clients and to show them this type of stuff because a lot of times it's hard to picture it. But looking at the difference in the dollar amount, starting with 100 grand in 2019, this person would end up with 351,000 compared to being in the S&P. Best case scenario would have been 219,000. That is a drastic difference. It's a $130,000 difference in where the cash value got to at that point. So again, the benefits to it, right? And this is specifically the S&P. You'd have to track it with other ones, but I love this chart because I think it gives you a really good idea on how it works. So from here, the next most important thing we need to remember is that the death benefit controls everything inside of an IUL. Absolutely everything. It is your number one control mechanism. The more life insurance the client is going to get, the more money they can put into that policy per month or per year, right? So, and essentially the less life insurance they get, the less money they can put in. So, there are five main magic numbers that we need to understand that are inside of the IUL. I'm going to get really technical on this, but I'm going to show you how this works when we actually look at some illustrations. Again, they're all controlled by the size of the death benefit, but the very first thing we need to understand is the minimum no lapse premium. This is the minimum that the client can pay and is guaranteed to essentially keep the policy in force for at least 20 years. With most insurance companies, it's at least 20 years. It can vary a little bit from company to company, but it's like the bare bones minimum. So, to be 100% honest, I don't even mention it to the client because you do not want your client paying that, right? And if you are the client, you do not want to pay that, right? I always tell my teammates that if a client ever asks you, what's the minimum on the IUL? You do not sell them a policy. That is not your client. That is not the type of client you want purchasing an IUL. They should never be asking what's the minimum. They should always be asking what's the maximum that I can put into this policy per month or per year. Because these are really designed to be higher ticket products. They're not designed to be low ticket offers. So we want to avoid that conversation at all costs. The second number you need to understand is the target premium. Now, there are two different ways I explain this, right? So it depends on if you're an agent or it depends on if you are a client. What the target premium really truly is inside of an IUL is it's essentially what the agent gets paid a percent of in commission. So if Zach were to help a client and the target premium on that policy is 3,500, he's going to get paid a percentage of 3,500. However, I tell the clients your goal is to pay at least that annually to grow cash value, which is true. So I usually recommend to the client like the target number, think of it like your minimum. Think of it like your goal. If your goal is to use this policy to grow cash value, you need to be hitting at least the target premium annually every single year with the goal to put in over the target premium every single year, right? That is the plan. Again, I don't talk about, I honestly, I don't even mention the minimum to the client. I talk to the client like the target premium is the minimum because they need to be paying that to keep the policy open and active long term. And for us as agents, if you have worked in the field for some time, you know if your clients do not hit their target premium annually, we run the risk of receiving a chargeback on our commission from whatever that insurance company is. Every insurance company has a different chargeback schedule and a different required time that the client has to hit the target premium. Most, it's usually 12 months on average. And it's important that the client hits it. So I always tell the client, target is your minimum. Think of it like the minimum because it doesn't do any good for the client if they pay under that. They run the risk of the policy lapsing. And for us, we need them to hit it at least in that first year. And then from there, the GAP, right, the guideline annual premium, there's different words for this, but essentially the guideline annual premium could be called guideline level premium, is the maximum premium that you can contribute in all years of the policy being opened. Every single year, that's the max. And then the 7 pay premium is like the extra fluff. It's a little bit of extra wiggle room that you can contribute in the first 3 to 5 years of the policy being open, depending on the client's age and health rating. And then I will usually explain to clients as they get a little bit of extra wiggle room to contribute a little bit more money in the first 3 to 5 years, right? And then lastly, the single pay premium. This is essentially the most that you can contribute in total into the policy in the first 3 to 5 years to essentially pay up the policy. Now, IULs essentially cannot be paid up because they're not whole life insurance, right? There's no guaranteed death benefit, but it basically says if the insurance company receives the single pay premium, like that amount of money over the 3 to 5 years, however long they allow you to put it into the policy, then pretty much the policy's paid up. Like it's basically guaranteed to last you for as long as you live. So a lot of people think single pay premium means that the client can just literally toss that whole chunk at the insurance company. No, no, it doesn't work like that. It's the max that can be over those couple years. So your most important numbers to know here, most important numbers to know are target premium and guideline annual premium. Those are the most important. You guys should know this like the back of your hand. You need to be able to explain this on the spot to your clients and to your team because these are the things that are going to make the most sense when you're actually looking at the design of how these things work. So from here, we're not going to be rookies. This is what rookies do, right? Rookies do monthly premium times 12 equals the target. You guys are not rookies, right? We're not amateurs. We're going to be experienced masterclass IUL designers. So when we go back to our 4 different ways to design the IUL, we're going to talk about the very first option, right? Which is juveniles, college planning. The best way to design this is whatever the client's monthly premium is that they're paying into that policy times 5 to 7, give or take, should equal the target premium on that policy. So let me give you an example because I'm probably speaking French to most of you guys. This is an example, right? So in this situation, this parent wanted to save $100 a month for their child. In order to do that, we're looking at a $150,000 death benefit. That death benefit controls everything. If we increase that death benefit, all the numbers up here are going to go up. If we decrease this death benefit, all the numbers up here are going to go down. And if you don't notice, the 5 numbers that I just talked about earlier are all up here at the top, right? They're all like highlighted because those are the most important numbers we need to know when we're structuring these. So for this client, right, their goal is to save 100 a month and slowly increase that over time for their child for college and then to be able to use later on in life. So if you notice, the target is at 400. Well, 100 times 4 equals the target. This is a great plan for this kid. So there's significantly more money going in than essentially what it costs to own it. Look at the minimum, it's super, super low. But the maximum we also want to pay attention to because we want to make sure that this kid has room to be able to contribute more money as the years go on. Now, we are choosing an increasing death benefit because we're adding money into the policy, right? So we're going to choose the ability to increase that death benefit over time. We're going to look at the category over here on the right-hand side. You're going to see the death benefit is increasing because the account value, or what we call cash value, is going to get added to that. So if this child ever were to pass away, knock on wood, all of the money that has been accumulated plus the death benefit come together and pay out to the family tax-free. Now, you'll notice, right? A lot of times this happens with juvenile policies. There's going to be some zeros in the first couple years of the policy being opened. And that's just because we're not maxing out the plan just yet, right? If they're putting in 100 a month, 1,200 a year, the max is 3,800 a year, there's a big gap there. So they're not fully maxing it out. But if this parent wanted to contribute an extra 1,000 or 2,000 up front, you would see probably no zeros. Those would go away, right? So the more money that we put in faster, the faster we have access to cash. Now you'll see a lot of times with kids policies, I do what's called like an increasing premium, where maybe they're saving 100 a month, then maybe they're saving 125, then maybe 150, then maybe 175, then maybe eventually they're putting in 200, then maybe eventually 250, kind of so on and so forth, right? Like if you look at age 21, 22, and this kid is going off to college, they're going to have access to about 60 grand inside that plan. Not bad, right? Not bad. I don't know about you guys, but I would not be mad graduating college with access to 60 grand, right? Not upset about it. So this is obviously something that this child could use throughout the rest of their life. They could take it over and start putting money into it for themselves. If we do this until they're 30, right? They're not putting in through, what is that, $300 a month? 73,000 goes in. They have 140,000 in there they can access. That's phenomenal, right? That could help them maybe buy a new car, that could help them travel, that could help them start a business. So The key is when we're showing this stuff to our clients, we have to give them ideas on how they could be using the policy, right? The different ways that this could work. If this child decided to save all the way until they're 60, they could start taking out 130,000 every single year as income in retirement, tax-free, accessible tax-free, if they took money out and put it back in throughout the course of their 60 years of being alive, right? So this is how I would structure this specifically if we're looking to do it for kids, right? For children. Now, from here, the next way is what we call tax-free retirement income, right? And again, usually we're looking at like an increasing premium in this scenario. So kind of similar to the juvenile plans, where you're probably looking at like monthly premium times maybe 7 to 9 should equal the target. And again, the death benefit is the control mechanism that's essentially letting us know what that target number is. Back in the day, we used to always say monthly premium times 10 should equal the target. Honestly, today it really shouldn't be that. It should probably be 7 to 9, somewhere kind of around there. But this is an example of what I would be saying for this type of scenario, right? So maybe this is somebody that is 30 years old and they're looking to save $500 a month into this account with the goal to increase that to maybe $1,000 a month at some point. So what you'll notice is 500 times 12, right, is 6,000 going in, and the target is only 3415. We're looking at a $250,000 death benefit. Again, what an amateur would do is make the target 6,000 instead of 3,400. What that would mean is this death benefit would probably be 500,000. And then what that would do is increase their maximum premium that they can contribute, ultimately reducing how much cash value is going to grow into this account over time. So that was the scenario that I just looked at with the ladies that met me through YouTube. So if the goal is cash value, right, for retirement, we want to get less life insurance, but we also want to leave some wiggle room for them to be able to increase their premiums later on. So usually my question is when I'm dealing with somebody this young, what's the most that you could see yourself contributing over the next 5 to 10 years, right? And let's leave some wiggle room inside that policy for them to increase that so that they're not left with too small of a death benefit, because that's the alternative. I've seen some people only put this person in like a $100,000 death benefit. And now they're capped at 500 a month. That's the most they can contribute. And now 5 years later, they have to go get a whole nother policy. We don't want that either. You have to kind of find that happy medium when it comes to these. And then this obviously allows them the ability to put in more money. We're doing an increasing death benefit, right? Obviously, we see the cash value growing. Let me move you guys up here. We see the cash value growing. Again, there's a zero in the first year because we're not max funding it, right? We're using this more for the long term. And then you just see this thing grow over time. Now, what's interesting is if you guys don't remember from here, our maximum that we can contribute per year is 11,952. If our max is 11,952, why are we able to put in 12,000 a year? Ah, because there's a little something called carryover. IULs have carryover. What that means is this client did not put in $11,952 in any of these first 10 years. So whatever they did not contribute carries over to the following year and the following year and the following year. Versus with like a Roth IRA, if you don't use it, you lose it. Right? You can put in 7,000 a year. If you don't contribute it, well, you don't get carryover to the next year. It's just gone, right? You start again at 7,000. IULs carry over. So that's another strategy that you can use with clients that when you're trying to go with a lower death benefit, if they're going to pay a smaller amount today, know that they're always going to have carryover in future years. This guy probably has, I don't know, 30 to 40,000 of carryover if we were to add all this up from the first 10 years. So because there's so much carryover, he can do 12,000. He could probably do 13, 14, 15,000 a year, right? And the cool thing about the carryover is let's say maybe in that 11th year, he gets like a big bonus check at work, gets 10 grand. He could toss that in here because he's got carryover from previous years, right? So that's important. And then obviously this is growing over time. Usually I would explain to the client, age 50, 201,000 has gone in. He's got access to $302,000, right? He could use that to fund a business. He could use that maybe to buy some real estate. If we go to age 60, he put in 321,000. Now there's 700 grand inside that policy at that point. I wouldn't say that's enough money to retire off of, but we're getting closer. And if we go till retirement, he would have put in 393,000, and now there's over $1 million inside that account when he goes to actually retire. So now, if he chooses to take this out as an income stream in retirement, right? He's able to take out approximately 119,000 a year, almost 120 a year. which by age 90 means you would have taken out a total of almost 3 million, right? 2.9 million, and you only put in 393,000. So my famous closing line is if you gave me 393,000 and in return I gave you back 2.985 million and it was tax free, would that be a pretty fair trade? Would you take that deal? Heck yeah, I'd take that deal. Like that's a great deal. So super easy, but just remember whenever you're designing these for people that are younger, you got to leave them some wiggle room to be able to put more money in. So this is our tax-free retirement income strategy. Now, the other option that we got here is life insurance and living benefits. Yes, there are clients that want it just for that. Typically, they're older clients that want it for just the life insurance and the living benefit feature. So, usually we're looking at a client that's a little bit older. This is looking at a client that is 60 years old and looking at $250,000 in insurance. You'll notice the very first thing here, something's different. I went with a level death benefit. Now, this usually means that the client doesn't necessarily care about the cash value. They more so care about the life insurance. Level can make more sense in that type of a situation. Not always, but sometimes it's important to run it both ways. So if this client wanted $250,000 in insurance, they didn't really care about the cash value. They're going to pay either the target or the annual maximum, whichever one is lower, right? That's what they're going to have to pay to keep this policy in force and active for life. The cool thing is, if this is structured correctly, they won't actually have to pay it for life. They can pay it for just a limited amount of time. So you're going to see the death benefit is not increasing because we did not do an increasing death benefit, right? So if this person were to pass away, the insurance company is going to keep the cash, the family will inherit the death benefit. Why this is good is because the cost of the insurance is actually going to decrease on this client in future years because the insurance company's net at risk is going down. So how they look at it is, well, if this guy were to die in this 11th year, right? We don't have to pay him 250,000. We really only have to pay him 250,000 minus 100,000. We really only have to pay him 150,000 because we're keeping 99. So essentially, he gives us 99, we give them 250. We're really only at a loss of 150,000. So their cost of insurance actually goes down over time if you do a level death benefit, which again can make sense for people that are a little bit older and only want life insurance. So at this point, I just ran this for 20 years, right? This guy could literally contribute this for 20 years. You can see the policy is more than fluffed with enough cash. It's going to sustain its growth forever. You just always have to remember that IULs do not have a guaranteed death benefit. So it's important that that's one feature, like whole life does, right? They have a paid up by a certain point. IULs don't. So if you're planning to stop putting money in at some point, you have to make sure that the client paid enough for it to last as long as they want it to last. So this is probably how I would structure it. Now, and yes, you can see it obviously goes all the way down to age 120, which is great. But if this client left it in here till 120 years old, they lived, they'd be at 3.279 million. Not bad. And then the last way, probably the most fun way that everybody loves, but most people have zero idea on how to actually do it, is designing the IUL for what we call immediate access to cash, buzzwords, infinite, and family banking. In this scenario, you're going to be looking at annual premium needs to either equal the 7 paid premium or the guideline level. It depends on how many years they're trying to fund it for, right? So a lot of times you're solving for what we call minimum non-MEC or you're solving for premium. Depends on how the illustration works. In this scenario, right, we're looking at a 45-year-old that wants to save $100,000 a year for 6 years. That's what they want to do. So to figure out what the death benefit would be to hold that in this situation, because he doesn't want to put any more money in, we're going to go with the lowest death benefit possible to allow the cost to remain as low as possible, right? So the easiest way to figure this out is solve for either minimum non-MEC or solve for death benefit to kind of figure out what you're looking for. So in this scenario, it spit out a death benefit of 1.460568 million. That's going to put the maximum level premium at 100,000 a year. Literally, he's contributing the absolute most he possibly can. This is the absolute cheapest you can possibly make this policy for this client. However, don't be an amateur. We do not sell somebody a $1.460568 million policy. We don't sell that. That is a big rookie mistake. We round up the death benefit to whatever the nearest 25, 50,000 is. And the reason is because life insurance comes in discounted bands of insurance. Usually every quarter million, there's going to be some kind of a discount that's going to get applied to that client. So sometimes, I'm not saying every time, but sometimes 1.5 million might be cheaper than 1.4679 or whatever the other one is. So do yourself a favor, clean it up, like solve for that just to figure out what the death benefit is. Then go back to your illustration software, clean it up, round it up to whatever you need to round it up to. Yes, it's going to slightly bump up whatever their guideline level is, but that's okay. It's just clean. It looks better. It doesn't make you look like you don't know what you're doing, right? And it gives them a little extra wiggle room if they want to put anything else in. And what we're focusing on here is what is the cash surrender value? What does this client have access to, right? Now, keep in mind, I'm working with one insurance company for all of these examples. As I kind of said in the beginning, this stuff is literally just for educational purposes. I'm not like showing you anything that you guys should be doing in terms of like making any recommendations or anything other than just using it as an example. There are different insurance companies that you would use for different types of clientele. I'm just sticking with one because I don't want to teach you guys how to read five different insurance companies. But there are certain companies that are better for this type of a client. There are certain companies that are better for the life insurance and the living benefits. So if you work in the industry, I hope you work for a company that is non-captive, that can work with more than one insurance carrier. Because if you only work with one insurance carrier, you're kind of trying to fit like a square peg into a round hole. Because that high chance that one insurance company can't do every type of scenario or aren't the best for every type of scenario. This one that we're specifically looking at here, I would not sell this specific company for this scenario. I'm just using it as an example. But you'll see in this scenario, by age, well, if we look 3 years in, right, this guy has access to almost 250 grand. Not bad. So if he wants to take out some money to go and purchase some real estate, or maybe the plan is to buy a business, right? He has the ability to do that. Alternative loan, right? He can use. If we look 5, 6 years in, $500,000 bucks. Not bad, right? If you look 6 years in, it's at a full wash, right? Put in 600,000. He's got 608. He has access to 637,000 in there. That's phenomenal, right? There was a gentleman that made a comment on one of my YouTube videos the other day that was like, oh, IULs are so terrible because you're not going to see any access to cash for 5 years and you're not going to have access, you're not going to break even for 15 years. I'm like, what? So it depends on how it's structured, right? Depends on how the agent is doing it. If it's incorrectly structured, that's probably true. But if it's not, guy breaks even after 4 or 5 years if it's properly structured, right? So, and then you'll just see that thing just grow. And if this guy waits until he's 65, 66 years old to start taking money out, right? Maybe as an income stream in retirement, it's going to pay him 140 grand a year. Not bad, right? So even my infinite banking, my immediate access to cash clients, I still show them an income stream just so they can see what that could do, but they're most likely going to be using it throughout the course of their life, right? So in this guy's scenario, he puts in 600 grand, and if he took it as income, he walked with 3.5 million. So that is what, 6, 7 times what he put in? Not too shabby, right? Not too shabby. So to kind of give you a little recap, a little summary on it, right? The four main different ways you're going to see an IUL used: your college planning, your retirement planning, your life insurance with living benefits, and then your immediate access to cash. All the different ways that you can design it, right? So keep in mind, like I said earlier, different insurance company for each one. It's most likely not going to be the same insurance company for all types of those options. So from here, some resources that I want to share with you guys. If you have not read these books, I highly recommend you do. Give me the number in the chat to how many of these books you have read. So if you've read 2 books, give me a 2. If you've read 3 books, give me a 3. If you've read 0 books, give me a 0. I want to see how many of you guys have read some of these books. Ooh, okay, I see a 3. I see a 0. We got to work on the 0. 2, 0, 1.5. That might mean we've got one in progress, right? I love it. I love it. 2. So some 2s, some 1s, some 0s. I don't see any 5s. Oh, we got to work on this. So everybody, you can actually pretty much find a PDF copy of each one of these pretty much for free if you Google it, right? Most of the stuff is actually pretty easily accessible. If I have to make a recommendation on the one to start with, just to grasp the power behind the product, I would start with Money, Wealth, and Life Insurance. It's literally this thick. You can read the entire book in 30 minutes. It's amazing. I would start with that. Then from there, if you're really trying to understand just life insurance as a whole and how it compares to other traditional retirement accounts, I would move on to tax-free retirement. If you're trying to understand the actual like infinite banking side of things, Laser Fund is a good one, right? Family Bank Strategy talks about the philosophy around it. And what would the Rockefellers do? Again, kind of just gives big picture on infinite and family banking. More so out and actually talks a lot about whole life, but it still relates to us in the IUL world as well, too. So you can also always follow me on YouTube. So if you haven't found me yet, in my opinion, I think I put out there some pretty great content that just goes over in little chunks all the different things that we talked about today in little short videos, 8 minutes, 7 minutes long. So you can scan that and get access to me on YouTube if you have not already found me. Last thing I want to cover with you guys is who is and isn't right for an IUL. This is very important to know. Unfortunately, not everybody is right for an IUL. If you're a part of my team, you've probably seen me turn people away before, right? We do have rules on the types of people that we allow access to these products. First thing is parents looking to save for their kids for their future. They might make a great candidate for an IUL. Second, any business owners, investors looking to build wealth that's accessible, tax-free, that's easy access, liquid, could use it for business deals. Those are ideal clients for IULs, right? We've got high income earners. I call them high income earners on a W-2, maxing out their retirement plans through work. Maybe they don't qualify to own a Roth IRA, and they're looking for somewhere to save a significant amount of cash that can grow tax-free. And then lastly, your working professionals, right? People who want a little bit more flexibility, a little bit more control than what is offered through their traditional retirement accounts through work. So these are the type of people that make the best candidates for it, and these are the type of people that don't make the best candidates for it. So if you come across an individual that is unfortunately living paycheck to paycheck, an IUL is not something they should be looking at because an IUL, as we saw in every example, minus the last one, is not immediately liquid. Therefore, it's not an emergency fund. So I have a quick story. There's a gentleman, he has been my client. Well, he's now, now been my client for a couple months, but I met him about 3 years ago. And he wanted an IUL. Young guy, 23, 24 years old, wanted an IUL. And I was like, all right, how much money do we have saved? Nothing. Like $200 to his name. I was like, all right, darling, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to give you a goal. When you get to at least 1 month of bills saved, 1 month, which for him was only $1,000. I'm like, when you get to 1 month of bills saved, come back and find me and we can talk. He got to his first 1,000, came back and he's like, I made it. I got to my first 1,000. I go, okay, great. Get to one more month. I need to have at least 2 months saved. Two before we even consider this. Took him a whole year. He ended up coming back and he got to his second $1,000 saved and he was so excited. And finally, we were able to actually submit for an IUL because I need to see one track record of saving and you also need to see that he has some kind of an emergency fund because these aren't liquid. And if he gets a flat tire tomorrow, which ironically he did in the process of us applying for it, you can't get the money out of an IUL, right? So that's important. Do not be afraid to turn people away because the last thing you want is a chargeback on your side on the commission because it looks bad for us as agents to have negative persistency with our insurance carriers. And it also looks bad to the client. And they're also losing money. It's lose-lose for everybody. So that is a no-no. The other kind, the get rich quick investors, the people that want to see really, really high returns, not your good clients for IULs because the fact that they just take time for the money to grow. You're uninsurable individuals because unfortunately there is a death benefit component that requires clients to be able to get approved, right, based on their age, their health history, and their criminal background. And there are unfortunately people that do not get approved. If I took a poll here, we probably all would agree with that it's usually somewhere between 20 to 30% of our clients unfortunately don't get approved due to either something in their health history or something in their background. And then lastly, people that just can't simply commit long term because an IUL is a permanent life insurance product that you need to own it forever, right? You got to have it forever. If they're at all thinking of canceling it, or if they're at all thinking of depleting it and not putting any more money into it, they are not your ideal candidate. So if you ever sit down with somebody and they're like, yeah, let me fund this thing for 10 years and then can I just take all my money out and like cancel it? Yeah, but why, right? Why would you do that? That is not your client. And I will let them know this is not the right product for you. If that's what you're looking to do, you're better off to put it in the market, do some kind of an investment, because this is something that in order for it to really work and do what it's supposed to do, you have to keep it forever. It's just the truth, right? So for people that are afraid of that, afraid of commitment, not your product. So from there, the last thing I'm going to cover with you guys is what to look at, or essentially what to look for when you're working with different types of insurance companies. Please, 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 please look for companies that are A-rated or better on AM Best, Moody's, S&P, or Fitch. Super, super important. These are companies that have a real strong credit rating. They have a significant amount in assets. If you're AM Best or better, I don't know what the minimum is, but they probably have at least 100 billion in assets, if not more. Ideally, some people will say been in business for 50 years or longer. I say 100 years or longer because it's not hard to come by. Most of the big insurance companies have all been in business for 100 years or longer. You got to make sure that the right insurance company has the right loan provisions for your client. So if your client is looking to do things like infinite banking and they need access to money in the first year, you've got to find the company that allows them to do that because not every company does. So make sure you're aware of that. You also want to make sure you're researching the indices that are available. Some insurance companies are very limited on what they offer and they only have an S&P or they only use volatility control indexes. Like you want a variety, right? You want to make sure you've got options to offer your clients. This is just a personal one. I don't work with any companies that don't offer all three living benefits inside of their IUL: critical, chronic, and terminal. There are a lot of companies that only offer chronic and terminal, and there are even more companies that only offer terminal. I like all three. So I wouldn't even offer an insurance company to a client that doesn't. That's just my personal opinion. And then lastly, it's helpful if they have a good reputation in the industry. I have worked with companies in the past that don't. I will not mention any names, but there was many times with my one of the agencies I worked for in the past where clients would say, "Oh, I looked up this company and they have such bad reviews for their customer service." And I'm sitting there thinking, they have terrible customer service because I have to deal with them, right? All the time. But I would always have to say to the client is, I understand they do have terrible customer service. I'll be very transparent about that. But what do you think of my customer service? Because you're not dealing with them, you're dealing with me. I deal with their crappy customer service. So as long as you like dealing with me, it doesn't matter how bad their customer service is because I'm the one handling it, not you, right? And I have to come up with all these ways to just make it make sense because that company had great products, they just had bad customer service. So it's easier just to work with companies that have great customer service and are great to their clients and really want to work with them and really want to work with you, right? It makes the whole process smoother. It makes the whole thing more exciting. It makes the whole thing just a better process all the way through. So, that being said, that is everything that I want to cover with you guys today. I am sure that there are questions. If you guys want to learn more anything specific from me, you're welcome to scan that little QR code. It's going to take you to a little landing page that will tell you more about IULs. You have the ability to actually request an IUL quote. You have the ability to schedule a phone call, anything more specific that you want to know. I know we covered a lot today. I believe it is what, just slightly after 9 o'clock Eastern, my time. So I will be happy to open this up to questions, and I believe Bethany is going to assist me in that. So if there are any questions that have popped into the chat while we were chatting, we can do a little
Yes.
zoom through and see.
Kara King, she asked, can you take a one-time loan and have it deducted from your death benefit one time?
Not to my knowledge. Not to my knowledge, no. Loans will always, always come from against the cash value, not against the death benefit. Yeah, if that exists, I haven't heard of it, so I don't want to say never because it's possible, but I don't believe so. No. The way the loans work is if you die with an outstanding loan, like let's say somebody took out a $100,000 loan and then they died, well, that loan's going to get deducted by whatever is in their cash value. And if they chose an increasing death benefit, then whatever's left in the cash value will get added to the death benefit when that person dies. So that might be where that could be what people assume, but it's still coming from the cash value. Yeah. A good question, though.
Okay.
Very, very good question.
There was also one, it was kind of explained in the chat, but if you could also answer the question, can you say the supplementary income part again?
Say the supplementary income. Oh, the line that I used for that. So instead of saying tax-free income in retirement, right? To create tax-free income, I usually say it creates supplemental income in retirement, accessible, tax-free. That is the politically correct way to say it. Supplemental income in retirement, accessible, tax-free. It just didn't fit on my slide, but that would be the politically correct way to say that. Yeah.
Does anyone else have a question? I can raise y'all's hand or I can
I saw one
unmute
from Kara
you.
at the end. She asked,
I
how
did.
do the loans get decided on how much and how they pay it back? So that's a great question. So the loans actually don't have any terms to it. So when somebody takes out a loan, there's no repayment schedule. It's not like when you go get a loan from the bank and they're like, oh, you have 72 months to pay this off. It doesn't work like that. You take out the loan, they don't tell you when you have to pay it off. That's up to you. Now, let's say this person's making premium payments. Let's say they're paying $500 a month into their policy. They can choose to have that 500 go back as a loan repayment, or they can choose to have it continue to put new premium into the policy. It's their choice. They can also choose to do like lump sum payments to pay off the loan, or they can choose to pay it off at one time. It's really up to them. The cool thing is with most of the loans, if they're paying the loan off within the first 12 months of it being taken out, they don't charge you any interest because that loan rate is charged at the end of the first year, not consistently throughout it. So if you're being assessed to 5%, if you pay that loan off at 11 months and 29 days, you basically got it for free. So that's kind of a cool feature. But yeah, there's no like set repayment. It has to be done in X amount of time. So now you will get notification, like if your policy is going to lapse on you or something because you took out a loan and you didn't put any premium back into it, the insurance company is going to email you and be like, dude, you need to pay off this loan or we're going to take the policy from you, right? So those things do happen, but there's no set. Yeah, that's a great question. Really, really good question. Mm, What
Okay, we have another
advice?
one. Yeah.
What advice
What
do you have
advice do you
for
have for agents that are relatively new?
That's a good question, Eric. Um, I guess it depends on what your goal is and what you're looking to do. I mean, if you're an agent that you are looking to work with these types of plans, I would recommend like get a good coach, like get on a good team, get a coach, be a part of a company or an agency that has good training around this type of stuff, where you can really learn and ask questions and be in an environment of people that are talking about it. Now, there's a lot of people that get into the industry that don't care to work with these products because they think they're too complex. They may seem like that after tonight's training, but I promise you guys, after you get this down, the IUL, in my opinion, is like so easy. It's not complex at all. But because I've worked with it for 9, 10 years, right? I talk to any other agent about it in the traditional world, they're like, that's like a foreign language to us. Some have still never even heard of an IUL. So if you're new and you want to learn, I definitely recommend get around people that are doing it, get on some training appointments so you can learn and you can see how we actually structure it for different types of clients. Get in some trainings, right? What you said, I learned more from your YouTube videos than my company. Well, good. That's great. I've heard that a few times, right? I have heard that a few times. I was like, that's great. Actually, the ladies from YouTube that brought me the poorly designed IUL the other day, she was so funny. She's like, I watch your YouTube videos and I take notes. And then I'm talking to the agent from this company that gives me this IUL, and I'm like, this doesn't align with what Amanda said in her YouTube video. I'm like, that's good. At least there's value. So I love that there's value that's given out there. And to be honest, I put that content out there for you guys because you shouldn't need coaches to do this. If you're actually following the right people, you should be able to figure this all out on your own. That doesn't mean that it's going to be easy or it's going to be a lot more work, but there is enough free content out there that you can do this. Literally everything we taught today, this is all you need to know. And then you just need to find the right insurance companies that you want to work with that you can do it, right? That's the most important part. So our agency is always looking for people. So if you guys are looking for good teams to be connected to, we can always talk about that. But the most important thing is that you guys are just somewhere where you feel like you are I will say the other important thing is that you're working with people that you can trust. Because in this industry, there's unfortunately a lot of bad coaches out there, and there's unfortunately a lot of bad agents out there. And I have met people that have come from different types of scenarios like that and really gotten really bad information from people that they thought were teaching them the right thing. So you guys now know the right thing. So if you go back to your home agency and they're teaching you something different, that's not right. Right. So you know, like that's probably not where you should be if they're teaching you something besides what you learned tonight, because this is all 100% correct. So there's another guy out there. If you don't follow me, I recommend following. His name is Doug Andrew. He's actually the author of the Laser Fund, and his YouTube channel is called, what is it called? Doug's YouTube channel. You can just Google Doug Andrew, but it is called, let me look it up for you. Doug Andrew, YouTube. Oh, Three-Dimensional Wealth. Three-Dimensional Wealth is his YouTube channel. He wrote The Laser Fund as well as a few other books on IULs. He's a really good one to follow too. So, Misfortune, yeah, Misfortune is another one of his channels too. So, what kind of companies would you recommend to work with for a better understanding? So, in terms of agencies to work with, or in terms of insurance companies? Another thing too, if you have questions, the insurance companies should be able to answer your questions too. But to be honest, I wouldn't probably talk to the insurance companies about really learning how to structure these products because they are going to give you like the textbook definition of how to do this, which usually isn't correct. Like they don't know what we know as agents on the field. And I have seen people lose clients by the clients calling the companies. So I always recommended the client, don't call the company, please call me because they're paid $10 an hour to do customer service work where we're paid a lot more to really know how to do this thing correctly. Uh, I only call the companies if I have product questions. I don't call them with design questions on how to design products. I go to my coaches and stuff for that. So, and there's a lot of different agencies out there. I've heard good and bad things about so many of them. So it's, you got to just find where you feel like you fit, where you've got a good team. So hopefully that's
So we
helpful.
have
Go ahead.
another question. What's your favorite way to ask about target premiums or leading a client into the maximum premium?
Favorite way to talk about target premium? I just talk to the client like it's the minimum. So I always let them know, like, this really is the true minimum that you should be putting on this policy. Because you guys, if you sell an IUL and the client is not putting in over the target, that means that so much more money is going towards the cost and so much less is going towards the cash value. So, like I said before, I wouldn't even sell an IUL to somebody if their question was, what's the minimum? That's not your client. That's not where that client goes is into a high yield savings account until they have built up a couple grand. And then we can talk, right? That is rule number one. Definitely not. Um, I talk like target is the minimum. There's an agent on my team. She's literally just one of my referral partners. And she's like, give it to me as simply as possible. And so she always goes, target equals the minimum. That's just what she knows to say. Target is the minimum because it really should be. Your client should never be paying the minimum on an IUL. And then the maximum, that's the max that they can contribute per year. That's the question you want them to ask, right? What's the most I can contribute? Well, that's the guideline level, right? That's the most we can contribute in all years of the policy being open. That's your goal to hit that within the first 3 to 5 years of the policy being opened. If your goal is to grow cash value, that's the goal. We want to hit that number, right? So that's usually how I talk about it to clients. I don't know if that officially answers the question, but that's how I would say it. Yeah.
And then we have one. Can someone design a policy for cash accumulation and high death benefits at the same time?
Yes. Um, you can. There are actually some companies that allow you to blend. So there's something called blending. You do have the ability to blend inside of an IUL, which will help with that. Not every company offers it. A lot of times you might hear it called like a base insured rider, but it's the ability to blend in a term rider into the death benefit of the IUL. So instead of getting $1 million in permanent life insurance in the IUL, maybe you go with $250,000 and then you get 750,000 in a term. And it's actually inside the IUL. So what that does is that keeps the cost of the IUL at the cost of $250,000, but it gives you the ability to contribute at $1 million death benefit rate. So that's getting pretty technical on it, but there are a handful of companies that allow you to blend, called blending, blend the death benefit, where it keeps the cost of the death benefit down, gives them a really high death benefit all at the same time, the ability to contribute a lot more money into the policy. Now, if they don't want to blend or if you don't work with companies that have the ability to blend, then you have to just come up with a happy medium. Where there's one that I'm working with right now where she really wants a $500,000 death benefit, but she can't save 20,000 a year. I'm like, honey, that's the max. Your target's at 5,000 a year on this $20,000 death benefit. Can we at least do 7,000 a year into the policy? And she's like, okay, I can do seven. But we all know the cash flow is going to grow slower on that, but she wants the $500,000 death benefit. So you gotta come to some kind of a trade-off there. Or a lot of times what you can do is get them $250,000 death benefit, get them a $750,000 term policy. So now they got $1 million in total coverage, but they're only paying for $250,000 inside that IUL if you don't have the ability to blend. So there are different strategies you can use. I am a big believer if you're in your 30s and 40s, like you should be looking at $1 million in total life insurance, but it doesn't need to all be in the IUL. You're probably going to look at $250,000, maybe at most a $500,000 in the IUL, get the rest in a term, just to get you the right amount of insurance coverage, but keep the cost down inside the product. So, yeah, great questions, guys.
Um, how do the loans get decided on how much and how they pay it back?
Did I answer that
I
one
think you
already?
answered that one.
Was there
Did
anything
you?
I? Yeah.
Well, then I think that's it. I
Well,
think
I will say
that's
too, you guys do get the ability to choose the loan type that you want. So most insurance companies have like a form that you have to fill out when you take out a loan, and you choose, do I want to do an alternative or do I want to do a purchase or do I want to do like a declared loan, right? You choose that at the time that you're pulling it out. And most insurance companies also allow you to change between the loan type that you have available as it's been loaned out. So if I start with a declared loan, I can switch it to an alternative loan at some point. You have the ability to kind of flip-flop back and forth, which is kind of cool. So there's a lot of different things you can do. But use again, these are the more technical side of things. You just want to make sure you know this stuff when you're working with insurance companies, what their rules are, because they are all so different. Like my agency literally has like 30 or 40 insurance companies now. I don't even know. There's new ones coming every single day, and they all work different. So I have spreadsheets on all of it. Like, how does it all work, right? Uh, let's see. I saw one more come in. How do living benefits work? That's a great question. The living benefits allow you to access to the death benefit of the IUL while you are alive, right? If you get critically, chronically, terminally sick, injured, or ill, depending on essentially what what is the what is essentially offered, I would say, by that insurance company. So if the client comes down with something that's considered critically, chronically, or critical, chronic, or terminal, they have the ability to pull money out of that death benefit while they are alive. Keep in mind they have a $500,000 death benefit, that doesn't mean they have a $500,000 accessible to them. It's going to get depreciated. So if they have a 500,000, maybe they only have access to, I don't know, 350,000, right? It depends on where they're at and what type of depreciation they're doing. I am personally not a big fan of them taking money out of the death benefit of their IUL. That's a lot of times why I recommend also include a term policy with living benefits. So if they get sick or injured, they pull money out of the term policy, not out of the IUL. Because if they start depleting the death benefit on the IUL, that's going to reduce how much they can contribute into that per year because you're reducing the death benefit. So it's going to affect all their numbers later on. But if you got them a term policy, well, that has no effect to the IUL. So they can pull from that, let the IUL do its thing. So it's kind of almost like that term policy is like the protection on the IUL, right? So if they get sick or injured, they pull from that death benefit. So I don't know if that answers your question. Who was that? Andrea. Hopefully that's helpful. But I still wouldn't sell an IUL without living benefits, but I don't necessarily try to use it either. Would you do a separate policy or just a term rider? I would, it depends on if the insurance company allows a term rider. If they allowed a term rider, you could do a term rider, but most don't. So you probably would just be doing a separate term in general for it. So a lot of times with young people, like you'll be looking at like a $250,000 death benefit, $750,000 term, total of 1 million in coverage, keeps the cost down on the IUL, and then it gives them two separate products. So if they get sick or injured, they pull from the term. If they don't and they want the cash value, that grows inside the IUL. That's a lot of times how we'll do it. So helpful. Cool. Did you guys all learn something today? Give me a one in the chat if we learned something today. At least one thing new, one nugget was taken away. And like I said, if I love the 1 million. I love it, Eric. Appreciate it. Love it, love it. Kara, all the ones, love it. Brad, all the ones, I love it. I feel like I've seen some of your faces, so it's nice to officially put like a picture to the name. I know some of you guys are commenting on my YouTube and my Instagram videos and all that stuff, so I love it. And really, my goal is just to help fix the industry. So if you guys can please help me, can we get on a mission together to make sure that the the brand and what this product really can do for people is kept held high. Because unfortunately, there's just so many bad agents out there that, in my opinion, they're not really supposed to be bad. They just were never trained correctly on how to do it. But if we all band together and we get out there and we educate and we teach and we do things the right way and we teach this stuff to our teams and to our leadership or whoever else doesn't know it, I really think we can change the entire perspective on how these products work. And who knows, maybe even someday Dave Ramsey will admit that he's wrong, that you do get to keep the cash value when you die. That's a big mission of mine too, to essentially at some point get in front of him. But I hope you all learned something. If you ever have questions, you can reach out to me directly. I think you all know how to get a hold of me. And I want to thank Bethany for helping me host tonight's class. And I definitely look forward to catching up with you all sometime soon. So enjoy your night.
Thank you.